Welcome to this presentation on digital transformation and disruption, and really what it means for us as organisational leaders. It's such an important topic. It's in the business press, it's in boardroom conversations, it's on frontline services discussions. And what we're going to look at today is what some of these terms mean, where the direction of travel lies in the research and the practice around these topics, and what it means for you as an organisational leader. So the format for today will run through. To begin with, I'll make a short personal introduction so you know why I'm talking to you today, and then we're going to run through an agenda where we explore this in detail. I'm currently the academic director for the MBA. I'm a professor of strategy in the Hunter Centre, and I've not always been on the business side of things. I think digital transformation feels like a home for me because I was an ex-process engineer with Procter & Gamble to begin with. Long time ago, was into C++ coding and VBA coding and using digital mechanisms and digital processes to try and drive production improvements and efficiencies. In the decades to follow since that experience, I've worked in a number of environments in SMEs and business startups and consultancy, and I've spent about half my career in academia, principally with a focus on strategy and strategic management. That was where my PhD was. But for a long time now, my research interest has been in and around strategy processes and practices and how digital technology interfaces with those, what a difference it makes in practice. I've worked with a large number of organisations in and around this space, and I continue to research in this area. I also teach on the digital transformation module on the Strathclyde MBA, and it's a great pleasure to be here with you today, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about this particular topic. We thank you for so many of you joining us from around the world as well, you know, with attendees from many different countries and locations. So what we're going to do today to cover this agenda is to think about what digital disruption and digital transformation mean for us, the potential for our organisations, and also the challenges for our organisations and us as managers, what we might do about it. Our agenda for today is that we'll start by reviewing what we might mean by digital transformation. We'll look at some of the trends and ideas and an example or two of what's going on in terms of digital disruption and how that affects us in organisational life. We'll then look at some organisational responses and challenges and opportunities that are presented by digital transformation. And we'll close, the final sections are about what we need to do about it. What does it mean for us in terms of our strategic leadership capabilities and how we build those capabilities to be ready for the new challenges posed by digital transformation. That first set of points will take about an hour to complete. We're going to have some polling as we go through. I'd like to take your opinion as we go, and that will all be anonymous and it's optional, so there's no need to join in if you don't want to, but hopefully we can get a sense of how we feel on this webinar about some of the key topics and challenges. After we've had that conversation, there'll then be a question and answer and a discussion section where we can open up the views held and expressed within this webinar. As we proceed, if you've got any questions arising, if you can use the Q&A function, please, to post those questions. If the question relates to something I'm saying and the material in the presentation, we will include that in the discussion after the main presentation is finished. If it relates to the MBA or any aspect of study with Strathclyde, then some of my colleagues that are also on the webinar will be available to answer your questions in real time. So we'll proceed. Anything that comes up you'd like to raise or discuss, please put it in the Q&A and we will come to it at the relevant juncture later on today. Okay, so there we go. That's us. We're ready to start. The first matter I would like to deal with, ladies and gentlemen, is actually just the title, digital transformation. What do we actually mean by that? We're going to take a broad definition that digital transformation is a discontinuous change, so a step change, to how an individual or an organisation or an institution, such as a country or a government or a system, operates enabled by digital technologies. So digital technologies offers us potential, and when we capitalize on that in any given setting, at any given scale, we might consider that digital transformation. Now, we do that in order to deliver some or all of the following intended outcomes typically. Digital transformation seems to hold this immense promise to create new value for customers. Now, that is a real motivation to not be left behind, to find new customers and attract new customers. That can be a driver for digital transformation. It might be that we want to look at our operational approach to deliver significant cost savings or speed performance, or make better use of our resources. That can be a key driver for digital transformation too. And there's a phrase, the business model, you know, it's used very widely as well, that typically means the ways in which we make money as an organization in a sustainable way. And finding new business models where we reach new markets in new ways is also a potential target outcome for digital transformation. Now, some of these things might sound private sector only. Actually, they translate into public sector and third sector as well. That it could be that instead of customers, we think of citizens or organizational citizens in civic life. It could be that in terms of generating money or finding new ways to make money, we're actually thinking about new ways to govern effectively. And for third sector organizations, we can think of stakeholders, and instead of money, raising funding or delivering social aims or securing our future. An example of digital transformation would be, and this is almost classical now, the introduction of Nike Plus as a way of creating a new sports technology category, a way of revolutionizing the customer usage data processes and opening up new revenue streams from individual technology services that Nike instituted about a decade ago. At the time, it seemed very unusual, very strange, and as a customer experience, you know, it took a long time for people to warm to these developments. But now it would be unusual for our large sports retail organizations to not offer these sorts of services. So there's something in this example about what it means for us as users of a service, what it means for an organization, what it means for an industry that relates to digital transformation. When we think of digital transformation, then we're going to model it at three different levels. We're going to talk about it at three different levels in terms of what it means for us as organizational leaders. We can think of digital transformation using the term disruption, and that is really where it's happening all around us. We can't control it, and we're going to explore a little bit what it means as a mega trend. Really, what we're talking about there is how are disruptive digital technologies developing. We need to stay current with that in order to plot our own strategic future and figure out the implications for the environment in which we're operating, whether it impacts us, our suppliers, our customers, the way we're governed, the way we compete. There's many questions arising from the environmental change of digital transformation happening all around us. There's also a question for our organizations where we think about how we do business. And this is described in terms of digital maturity. What that means is, if you think about your operating philosophy as an organization, to what extent is digital incorporated into that? That question of digital maturity might be answered with, well, we don't really do anything digitally, through to digital is at the very heart of what of how we operate, and that is what we would describe in, you know, low to high digital maturity. The questions that raises for us as organizational leaders relate to the structure of our organization, the culture or the normal ways of working that we have, the roles that we allocate, sometimes specifically to digital, or incorporating into continuing roles some aspect of digital, and the objectives we set ourselves as an organization to make the most of digital transformation. And the question for us as organizational leaders there is, how can I influence that digital approach, that digital maturity for the long-term benefit of the organization? And then at an, I suppose, initiative level of working, we can look at specific digital innovations we seek to put in place whether it's new products or services or processes or systems, so external or internally facing outcomes. We can select from the many, many possibilities that we have, the specific initiatives which we think will help us exploit new digital options. And also we can think about the process by which we're putting these things into play in order to be effective operators of digital transformation. Now, clearly these matters are not unrelated. And actually, there's an embedded system here where the broader environment is shaped by organizational practice, which changes over time through initiatives. But the initiatives that are triggered relate to the organization and are enabled by the external environment. So this is not separate matters, ladies and gentlemen. But for us, as we try and make sense of this, it's helpful to think in these different levels. And we're going to work through what some of these might mean and the implications as our first part of this presentation. If we think of digital transformation as a mega trend, then to begin with, a mega trend is a concept. It describes a global trend happening all around us, reshaping the world and changing the way in which we live and do business. So an example of this might be globalization. It's a mega trend. That describes the increasing interconnectedness of the world, information sharing, logistics, people movement, so on and so forth. Another megatrend might be sustainable development that is reshaping how we live and work and how business happens, how government happens, and the rules that govern us. Okay. The characteristics of a megatrend is that they tend to have what we could say is irresistible momentum. You can't stop them, and they aren't controlled by any individual organization or institution. In some ways, we all pay into them, so our collective actions lead to the megatrend continuing and changing shape. We may think we have no influence on digital disruption, but if you think about how you do your banking, or how you book your travel, or how you use your mobile phone or your devices, all of these contribute to the acceptance of new ways of being and new ways of working with digital that sets the platform for the next developments. So the consequences of megatrends are really quite wide-reaching, and they are disruptive. They shake up the established order. You know, whenever anything is sort of stabilized, it's just primed to be disrupted. And the adoption of digital technologies is having that effect on our world, on our lives, on our businesses, as a mega trend. So what we're really saying there is all around the world every day, the activities adopting, using digital technologies in novel ways are radically changing the way we live and work. You may also hear the terms Industry 4.0 or the new industrial revolution. In the context of today, these are synonymous with digital transformation as a mega trend or digital disruption. So what does that mean? Well, for us, if we think about the possibility of the digital future, and this could be for us as individuals, either as consumers, as citizens, as managers, as colleagues, as suppliers, this is about every aspect of how we live and work. When we look at the future and what digital technologies might enable, we can say, well, I want safe and secure access from anywhere to everything. This is a world being created by cybersecurity, by 5G, by cloud computing. I'm going to talk about these terms shortly. You might say, I want real-time information that I trust at my fingertips to allow me to make decisions. That's the emergence of this idea of the Internet of Things, of blockchain technologies, and of big data and analytics. And I want things to happen easily and intuitively in the best possible way for me in a customized way. So that's technologies of automation and artificial intelligence. In combination, these technologies are opening up a new future where, as citizens, as customers, as managers, we can fulfill this ambition of doing what we want from anywhere, at any time, with ease and total confidence. So what I'd like to just dwell on a little bit, ladies and gents, is what's happening in the background from digital disruption to enable that digital future. On the left-hand side of the screen, you have a range of different technologies that, digital technologies, sorry, that some have been around for a very long time, some are relatively new. This list is not exhaustive. There's no quantum computing, there's no augmented reality or virtual reality there, for example. So this is illustrative. But what you've got is digital technologies that individually provide some sort of outcome. You've got efficiency technologies rising to the fore, which help us really change operational performance and drive down cost in a way that's not possible without digital technologies. You've got technologies that enable new ways to connect and interact together, letting information flow and remote working happen, which has been, well, just a spectacular rise in the last year for obvious reasons. We've got technologies that are helping us with our interactions, to trust them, to find them secure. And that is a crucial enabler as the world becomes more connected. We've got technologies that are helping us analyze, to make decisions driven by data, and a sort of computational power that means we can interrogate data in a way that's impossible through conventional or traditional means. And we've got automation technologies that are helping us turn routine or laborious tasks into automated responses, improving the capabilities and service given to humans in all aspects, and improving the health and safety of many operational tasks that previously were done in a manual way. Enabling all this, we've got the idea of cloud computing, which is massive computing power available on demand as a service when you need it, including the applications, including the platforms, including the infrastructure. No longer do you have to buy everything or do everything yourself. Basically, you can gain access for a very small fee, increasingly small fee, to any computing power and applications you need to run your organization. The field of data science and data analytics, using big data, which just means high, voluminous, varied data sources of all different kinds, are now becoming available to us to fuel our decision making. Data was described as the new oil, as a commodity that will power industries for the decades to come. And how we analyze that and use that, there's many different technologies there. The Internet of Things refers to the connectedness of our devices. How many devices do you have in the room around you just now? All talking to the internet, all providing information, acting as sensors, and also providing a computing power very near to you. When they start to join up, the Internet of Things is the concept that arises. It's now said there's more devices connected to the internet than there are human beings on Earth. So the largest network on Earth is comprised of our devices. 5G is the latest communication protocols, the latest communications technologies that crucially give ultra low latency in signals. That means there's no delay between the, or a very, very low delay rather, in information being shared through information networks. That suddenly enables autonomous vehicles operating in convoys. That suddenly enables augmented reality in a mass consumer way. These sort of technologies are having a profound impact. AI and machine learning and automation are changing how we process data. They're reshaping the way in which work happens. And we're not talking here about the sort of computing power represented in science fiction where there's robots that can do everything. It's channeled, it's directed towards specific functions, towards specific outcomes. But that is changing the way in which we work together. And underneath that, all blockchain technologies and the art and practice of cybersecurity are booming industries. They are really vital to ensure the integrity of this system. But none of this works on its own. It all works together. It all meshes together to provide a transformation in how we live and work. I think the example of the Singapore government is absolutely fantastic in illustrating how digital disruption opens up new potential and possibilities for us. On the left-hand side of the screen, you have a strategy chart from the Singapore government around how it will create a digital government future and who's involved and how initiatives will work together in order to deliver this future. What's interesting for me about this is that Singapore already is at the forefront of IT infrastructure and digital infrastructure, yet it keeps pushing. And as it does that, it recognizes the human aspect of digital transformation and digital disruption. Digital to the core means high digital maturity in the systems of government. But serving with the heart recognises that digital doesn't replace people. It augments, it creates new possibilities, it creates a platform for better performance that helps citizens, helps businesses, helps all who visit Singapore to have a fantastic experience and live the best possible life. Recognising that that includes those in government, undertaking initiatives that raise the digital literacy of the population and the engagement of the population, make it easier for the government to run the country effectively. If you look up any of the initiatives that the Singapore government's doing, it's really quite inspiring. There's a lot we can learn from that. And I could have picked a number of other smart cities around the world or smart nations around the world that are following as well. Singapore, in my mind, are at the forefront of this. On the right-hand side of the screen, you've got an example of how data visualization using all manner of devices in public life to provide real-time information, to help structure public services, to help monitor trends over time, to shape investment. These are all applications of all the things we talked on the last page to change how we live and work in a particular setting. So digital disruption, ladies and gentlemen, it's happening. We can't stop it, but we can understand it, and we can try and harness the power of the environmental changes that are going on to deliver real positive change in our lives. If we turn our attention then to how we do that at an organisational level, typically the strategic intent of digital transformation is to really drive down costs, greatly improve customer experience, or do a bit of both to find new business models, new markets, or reaching new markets in new ways with new propositions. Digital transformation helps because our current ways of working in many industrial settings are suboptimal. That we're either served by poor efficiency of processes or utilization of resources, or we don't really understand our customers or don't offer them anything different, or we have systemic setup which is ineffective or inefficient, or new options are arising which gives us better ways of working together. So digital transformation for organizations suddenly springs up these sets of options that we can move on to exploit. But when we do that, it's not as straightforward as just hiring a new technologist or buying a new piece of equipment. Far from it. The pandemic has helped us break through some of the inertia that tends to exist around any sort of large-scale change. But the advice is that we need to still take a long-term view as organisations when we're thinking about how we invest and how we drive towards a digital core in the future. Bonnie and Westerman highlight two key dimensions that we need to consider when we are looking to drive digital transformation in our organisations. They highlight the need to enhance digital capability, and they highlight the need to activate leadership capability in order to meet the challenge of being effective in the long run using digital technologies. Now we're going to explore what each of these means, because there's a lot in this that we as organisational leaders can get involved in or make a difference with and really help change our organisations. Firstly, in terms of digital capability, what this means is the potential that comes from using innovative technologies to improve elements of the organisation. The model on the screen, I partially apologise for the colour scheme. It's a direct citation from a very recent article in the MIT Sloan Management Review, shows the latest model of how digital capability is understood. You can see that it refers to that business model piece, one of the key motivations we talked about earlier, where we enhance what we currently have. So digital transformation doesn't have to mean throwing everything away. It can build on what we already have. It very often means generating new revenue by offering information-based services to our customers in addition to what we already do, or potentially opening up our internal systems, our own internal IT platforms, to be used as a way for customers and suppliers and others to meet, so-called multi-sided platforms, other people using our platforms, as a way of generating new revenue. So these are all happening, and these changes are all happening in pretty much every industry around the world. In the middle layer, you can see that digital capability refers to how we use technologies to enhance the customer experience, designing much smoother, much more effective, much more enjoyable customer experiences, learning more about our customers as we do that, as we accumulate data, and drawing our customers into the construction ongoing of the latest round of services. So what's called emotional engagement means when we monitor customer experience usage and customer data, and we take that as direct feedback to build the next set of services. So our customers can see the things that were annoying them or the things that they use well enhanced or responded to in the next round of developments. In terms of operations, it's about how we automate core processes to improve efficiencies. It's how we increase our resilience and reactiveness to changes in the environment around us, to customer demand, to natural disasters and supply chain disruption. You know, for example, the evergreen situation lately, you know, caused a massive issue for global supply chains. So using our digital systems to dynamically react to that in the optimal ways is something that is, you know, a very clear possibility now for organizations. And at all levels of the organization, from the boardroom down to the service provision or frontline operations, using data to inform how we make decisions. If you're not doing these things now, it's likely that you're going to be at a competitive disadvantage in the near future. It's never too late to start, or never too early to start. What's really been enhanced in recent times as well is recognise that employees have to feature in this idea of digital capability as well, far more than they have in the past. There's a lot of stresses, and we'll talk about this shortly, that come from the digital experience that you may relate to from your own work, of the uncertainty that's created by digital technologies. New technologies come in, you have to learn about them. There's, in some cases, worry about, is this technology going to take away my job? You know, what's the consequences of having my role augmented by technology? And finding positive ways to help people maximize their contribution, protect their health and well-being, and really take away some of the negative aspects that might exist just now in a job is what we talk about in terms of employee experience augmentation with digital technologies. Future readying is quite simply ensuring we have the skills and the capabilities to meet future demands, which means investment today, new roles, new training, new capabilities to be able to exploit digital technologies that we sense are being developed. And flex forcing, which is a really interesting academic term, means that we are now able to work with people all around the world in new and exciting ways on demand through digital technologies, which changes our employee experience as well. And all this sits on top of a digital platform, which has to be at the core of what we do. We have to have superb external facing systems as part of our marketing and customer engagement. And we have to figure out how we use data. And data is a really interesting one because it's widely recognized as being crucial to the future of organizations. Yet the usage of data and investment in analytics and even data capture is sadly lacking in most organizations. But these are places in which we can make differences as managers, as organizational leaders. Now, for the leadership capability one, I'm going to ask a little poll first of all. I'm going to ask you what you think, if I may. So I'm going to open a poll now, ladies and gentlemen, which I'm going to launch this. Okay, so on your screen, you should have 2 questions. I'd ask you to respond just authentically, if you don't mind. If you read the options for each question. Question 1 is, what is the most important skill leaders require to succeed in a digital workplace? If you could just click the one that you think is the most important to you. This is anonymous. It will not be traced back to you. You will not be asked to expand on it. If you could share your views, please, that would be appreciated. The second question is, what do leaders in your organization need more of to better navigate digital trends? So thinking about where you work or where you've been, and asking the question of, sorry, I just noticed there's the other 2 questions are still available on this. So just do questions 1 and 2 for now, please, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we need just now is questions 1 and 2. Thank you. So thinking about what really matters in your organisation, where do you see the need for leaders to do more of something to better navigate digital trends? So we'll give it another minute. I've got the results of a 16,000 person survey on these same questions, which I'd like to share with you afterwards. So please cast your views, and then we'll see how our outcomes stack up to what a very broad survey said. Apologies, that was my mistake on the opening. We'll just work with it, 1 and 2. If you can answer those, please, that would be great. We'll give it one more minute. Oh yeah, okay, sorry. Yes, I was going to use the other ones later, but actually there's no reason why we can't answer them just now. Sorry about that, that was just a misinterpretation on my part. So if you answer all the questions, please, you're getting a sneak preview of where we're going in the future as well with this. So you can read the details yourself. The third question asks about the biggest threat to your organisation as a result of digital trends. And then the fourth one is about where's your, where would you like to develop most as a strategic leader? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So 30 seconds and then we'll share the results. We'll see how we get on here. Okay, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Okay, if you've not done so, if you could just click submit, please, ladies and gents, and then we'll see where we've come out as a group here. Okay. Right, I'm going to end the polling now. So we'll share the results. So on your screen, you should be able now to see the outcomes of this particular survey. In part 1, what is the most important skills leaders require to succeed in the digital workplace? Nearly half of attendees highlighted, or half of voters, sorry, highlighted that change orientation, being open-minded, adaptable and innovative is the #1 skill for leaders. That's really really interesting, that that as a way of recognizing the inherent challenge of digital transformation as a specific kind of change project's a really interesting insight. And then followed up by transformative vision of what's going on outside and having the understanding to then translate that into what we can do internally. Very good. If we look at what came up in the survey of this same question, this was done by colleagues from MIT in partnership with Deloitte, surveying organizations around the world, managers of all different levels over a period of 4 years, asking the same sorts of questions, about 16,000 in the population. In total, the top skill required was around transformative vision, but there wasn't that much to choose between that and being forward-looking, understanding technology, and being change-oriented. Now, in terms of what we came up with there, the understanding technology was really pretty low. This idea of digital literacy, which means understanding the technologies are out there and their potential capabilities, what they could do for us, and knowing how to engage with others in discussion around them is something that is really at the fore just now as a topic of interest. But given we could only pick one, that change piece is something that we'll discuss shortly and some of the challenges that we actually face. In terms of the second response, creating conditions for people to experiment was just narrowly ahead of building talent as something that organisational leaders need more of to better navigate digital trends. That creating conditions for people to experiment with, as someone who's a strong innovation interest, I couldn't agree more that in the digital environment, that is absolutely crucial. That we are no longer able to drive things individually. We have to work in multifunctional teams. We have to create conditions to do that as well, in which it's okay to fail. It's okay to be permanently experimenting, and actually failure is even the wrong word. We're always learning when it comes to deploying digital technologies. So if we look back at the second part of this leading capability, the leadership capabilities piece, what do leaders in your organization need more of to better navigate digital trends? Well, when this survey was taken, direction setting was seen as absolutely key, followed up by innovation. Now, in the material that goes with this, the explanation was that because digital's changing so fast, if we don't have that sense of vision of where we're going with it and what it's going to do for us and what it means for our organization, we can flounder, we can resist. It can be problematic. And the role of the leader was seen very clearly as giving people that confidence, enough confidence to go and start to work on things themselves. But then if you don't create the right innovative environment in which people can experiment, then that is going to be the limiting factor on your progress with digital transformation. Thank you very much for sharing your views, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come back to the other polls later. The point about this I was hoping it would make is that I wanted to counter the results of a survey with something from our own webinar today. It totally depends on your situation, what the needs are in your own organisation. When we do these big surveys, they're in a moment in time, they can highlight things that might matter, but it's really up to us to know what specific leadership capabilities are required in our organisation to drive digital change. We have to be systematic, we have to be situational and react to the specific needs of the organisation. And what the survey that we've done with ourselves shows that there's many varied views out there and nobody is wrong at all with what they've put forward. We have different matters we have to deal with, and it's important that we think and reflect on what are the specific leadership capabilities we need to succeed. And the reason it's imperative to do these things is that the saying goes with digital transformation for organisations, the opportunity is exceeded only by the existential threat. That is not optional. You cannot look to the future and reasonably predict a lack of digital operations and digital transformation in your workplace. Sorry, I'll deal with the if you don't mind, I'll cover the chat questions at the end as well. Sorry, that just popped up on the screen. If you could use the Q&A function to raise questions, please, ladies and gents, and we'll share a copy of the information. I'll highlight all the sources. I've put little holders at the bottom of each of the slides as well, and you'll get a full set of information afterwards as to where everything's come from. On the screen on the left-hand side, you've got a chart from George Westerman and colleagues who are key researchers in MIT. Not the same ones as the last study, but authors of some length of time in digital transformation. Westerman and colleagues plot digital capability against leadership capability, and they identify 4 categories of organizations. As you can see, the beginners are those where there's not a lot of digital capability building going on, and the leadership attitude is largely one of skepticism, that actually digital doesn't apply to our industry or our organization because of its history or structure or whatever. That's a problematic place to be. Those that have invested in building digital capability, but in almost an ad hoc fashion, working potentially in silos, or in the fashionistas area. There's little pockets of digital culture within the organization, but it's not coordinated, and therefore the business results are underwhelming relating to digital. You then have leadership capability that buy into this digital future, but remain conservative about how digital will feature in the future, investing slowly while the world around accelerates. That is moving in a useful direction in one way, but needs to develop digital capability further. Then you have the digital masters, where the leadership vision, the strategy, the attitude, and the culture of the organization pushes towards digital, and the investment follows, and the innovation follows, and the changes in how the organization works are there. And what the research shows since this was published, even up until last month, that the digital masters are pulling away from the rest of their competition. In some ways, that's problematic, because we're seeing monopoly situations spring up everywhere in different industries, because organizations are offering such good service, being rewarded by customers at scale adopting their approach, that others are being seriously left behind, and they continue to invest and they continue to pull away, because there's actually potentially a sustainable competitive advantage when you embed digital in your culture. The profitability and revenue generation charts on the right are from 2014. Didn't have an updated version of them, but can only imagine that they've grown in terms of the potential to generate new revenue and increased profitability arising from digital. So thinking about how we grow our leadership capabilities and our digital capabilities is absolutely vital to the future. For me, this comes down to a need to be constantly trying to transform operations and transform the organization through digital innovation, making sure that we have educated leaders that draw together strategic objectives that help us focus on useful digital transformation initiatives. We then have leaders that are capable of selecting the right technologies, motivating and engaging people, making it a pleasure and a joy to be involved in digital transformation, because it improves the workplace, it improves our longevity and sustainability, and running digital transformation initiatives through effective project management practices. Recognizing that this is difficult, recognizing that it's a shifting external context, that how well we execute the projects is going to have a massive impact. And if we don't take the time to build buy-in and set realistic goals and targets and timescales, then we can label digital transformation initiatives as failures really easily. But actually, the potential is largely in our hands to exploit these things in our organizations. And making sure that we always take the time to learn from experience as we go through our transformation initiatives, making sure that as leaders we set the right attitude to learning, to risk, to failure, to change, and we adopt almost a permanent beta mentality to how we work with systems and processes in the digital technology arena. That's on us to do that, and that's something that once you start to get into that mindset, it liberates you. You see new potential anywhere, and you start to create that innovative environment that you highlighted as being absolutely crucial to the success of digital transformation. I fully agree, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm not just saying that, I do genuinely mean that. It potentially raises the need for new metrics of management, to think of what we're doing as leaders in new ways in order to encourage that sort of digital innovation improvement. This is just an example. A recent McKinsey article said that the CEO should monitor markers of digital progress towards digital maturity that relate to, really pay attention to digital investments. Make sure that you're spending enough of your budget on digital work. It doesn't happen by accident, you have to get into it. Think about how quickly you're responding, thinking about how well your leaders are incentivized to drive digital, and make sure that you keep your digital talent within the organization. Now, McKinsey are a very strong and established organization that are advocating this as part of their consultancy portfolio. How well does your organization do these things, ladies and gents? Maybe not using these specific words, but how well is it investing, tracking progress, incentivizing, building talent? These are challenges that we need to consider and we need to look at whether we're running the organization or whether we are part of the workforce, what do we see around us? Because these are clues as to the longevity and the success in the future of our organization. But there is a very serious point associated with this as well, is that everything I've said, the research points to. We have many examples of successful digital transformation organizations out there, but on the whole, digital transformation is still in its infancy, and there is so much you can do as organizational leaders to contribute to this and improve how this is done in order to make a better future in our organizations. The spend on digital transformation is going up at an absolutely huge rate in terms of technologies and consultancy services. But yet, and you may not be surprised to hear this, many initiatives, so 70% reported here in Forbes, did not reach their goals or their target outcomes. That could be to do with over-expecting from technologies at low levels of digital maturity. But it tells you something about where there's room for improvement. The crisis has made significant value associated with digital transformation, and most company leaders expect this to be increasingly the case. But at the same time, only 13% of leaders believe their organizations are ready to compete in the digital economy. There's a gulf between what is recognized to be needed and the capability of organizations to respond. For your own careers, those that are able to master digital transformation in your industry, in your sector, or in your type of organization that you want to follow in your career path, building that digital capability or digital leadership capability, yourself, is, there's so much potential there to have a fantastic career off the back of that. And this is something to really think about. But why is that? What's actually going on to lead to that? Well, in our poll, and asked with the question of what is the biggest threat facing your company as a result of digital trends, competitive pressure and internal issues were tied. Now that is really interesting, isn't it? That we've got the external factors really pushing in on us, and we've got internal inability to respond. This is, what we've come up with here today, ladies and gentlemen, in the poll, is absolutely what we see in our company engagements and the organizations we are working with. We see these sorts of issues across industries. And the first part about competitive pressure there suggests that actually, it reinforces that point. This isn't optional in responding to this. But the internal issues highlight that we're not doing ourselves any favors. Seeing the problems coming along, but not being flexible to adapt to them, we need to start that work today to get ready to address that. And that corresponds quite nicely, actually, to what came out in the bigger survey. So we are in alignment with that one, that in terms of the internal and the external, there is clearly a balance there. And this survey, again, was taken at a moment in time when things have moved on since then as well. But recognizing it's not just, we've heard one competitor's adopted a new technology. No, this is an environmental change, an environmental shock we need to react to. And it's going to change the way in which we organize and perform as an organization. As leaders, we must address that. The research also suggests that it's a very human concern how we do that. And actually, it's not at all about the technologies, because the technologies give us possibilities. They are what they are. If we don't have the right mindset, or our organizational practices aren't where they need to be, actually digital transformation can magnify those flaws. And when it comes to what we do in response, the leadership challenge is greater than the technical one. In large organizations, we know they're complex. We know that there's so much to consider, and it's human beings have their own mind, they have their own interests, they have their own routines, and are therefore much harder to control. So starting the work now to engage and bring people in and raise the level of capabilities in digital performance and digital innovating is so important in order to not be made extinct as an organization by this ongoing digital disruption. In terms of broader issues that we have to deal with as we go, I didn't want to not mention these matters as well, but you must be aware of these too. That we need to deal with, and perhaps these are areas we can, as we try and bring people in, really focus on as well. The human resource side is increasingly important. So any HR professionals on this call, I'm sure will be identifying with this, that we need to find ways to alleviate the anxiety from the changing nature of work, to find ways to upskill colleagues where it's not a burden. And actually, we think about the health and well-being of everyone in this now constantly connected world. I've run the digital transformation class for a few runs now, and when we talk about this matter with students from all around the world, the constantly connected nature of our world, always on the phone, always accessible 24/7, is exhausting, and it takes the pleasure away from many aspects of work. So how do we deal with that? Digital transformation isn't about squeezing more out of your employees so that they become ill. This is about how can we improve lives, but that is a real concern. And we need to be mindful that engaging in digital transformation doesn't solve all our problems, and we don't just start to believe we have the answer to everything, data hubris, so-called. And we avoid burnout from taking away routine tasks from people so that all they're doing is ad hoc working or specialist working. We need to still retain balance in our jobs and in our work lives. Very often with digital transformation, you end up having to run parallel legacy systems. So as you transition to a new digital way of working, some of your customers might not want to change. There's a transition period which adds complexity alongside your existing operations. If you give customers more choice, you can bank with us digitally or you can come into branch, all of a sudden you've just increased your cost base and your organizational complexity. And if you take some of those options away, someone's going to be disappointed and you might lose customers. So there are challenges here as we seek to transform digitally that we also need to plan for and also need to think about how we can do this in a smart manner. I've mentioned already that, potentially unfair competitive conditions are arising. Unfair in the sense that it's impossible to close the gap. It was our own fault if we've fallen behind a digital master because we just didn't see it coming. But how does that work on an ongoing basis where we have this non-level playing field between digital adopters and non-digital organizations in a sector? And I think it's worthwhile mentioning that as a leader, you might be asked to engage with government, you might be asked to engage with the press in talking about societal or ethical concerns in relation to digital transformation for your own services or perhaps in general at some point in the future, which means engaging with ideas of data privacy or cybersecurity or a whole range of different ethical challenges and biases. The idea of digital poverty is really interesting, that we presume people can access digital means. Can they? Can our customer base really use the devices that we anticipate they have to use our services? Different generations of customers, how well are they set up to work in a digital or use our services in a digital environment? There's many things that we need to consider when we're leading digital transformation. But as we've established, ladies and gentlemen, it's an imperative. It's something that we have to do. So when it comes to our strategy and what we do as an organization, and whether that's a strategy within a team or a division or the whole business, digital transformation is disrupting. It's disrupting strategy in probably two key dimensions. It's rewriting the rules of what's possible and indeed desirable to do in strategy work. How do we use data and data analytics to inform strategy? Is there any part of the process that should be automated? So for example, in the world of scenarios and scenario planning and future foresight, automated scenario generation is becoming a real industry powered by artificial intelligence. There's some fantastic strategy potential that's coming out of there, but we don't really understand it yet. And in terms of how we work together, the platforms we use to engage, the way we gather data and draw people into the strategy process, all our stakeholders, that is having to be recalibrated in terms of strategy. In terms of what happens to us as leaders and the impact it's having on us, digital disruption as an accelerant is meaning that we have to be digitally literate. There's quite a few articles that have been written recently that the extent to which your board in your organization is digitally literate will have a profound impact on the future of your organization, because the decisions that are taken today will shape your capability in the next 1, 2, 3 years. And if you're not investing that's not a good place to be. So building our digital literacy, our familiarity with digital technologies is absolutely crucial. And also becoming comfortable with looking to the future, being foresightful. That's something that digital disruption makes an imperative for us. And in terms of internal, the imperative is for renewal, that we try and work towards digital maturity. And that takes our strategic leadership to envision what we're going to be like in the years to come, engage the workforce around us, and enable colleagues to participate and get involved in digital transformation through creating that innovative environment that you highlighted earlier. And digital as an evolution of what we need and how we can create value means that through digital innovation initiatives, we must try and adopt this permanent beta philosophy, this constant learning by doing as we go. Don't punish failure, don't criticize, don't get hung up on perfection. You know, what's the saying? Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. In the digital world that keeps moving, you need to do that as well. I really like this concept, ladies and gents. I wanted to share it today, and we're nearly at the end of our journey through this initial conversation. That strategic leadership is a concept that for me resonates with the challenges we've just discussed. According to Schumacher and colleagues, a strategic leader is someone who is both resolute and flexible, persistent in the face of setbacks, but also able to react strategically to environmental shifts. Well, we're facing, digital disruption in combination with globalization and pandemic recovery and sustainability and so on and so forth, amongst other mega trends reshaping the world around us. We need to react to that with one eye on the long term, one eye on the near. Being resolute, so confident and capable, but willing to change our mind and adapt, recognizing we don't know everything is so important. And not being put off by the fact that things will go wrong. Of course they will, because nobody really knows what's going on here. But we can respond in better or worse ways. We can respond in more effective or less effective ways. And we strive for those more effective approaches. The characteristics that Schumacher and colleagues highlight as being really crucial are being able to anticipate how events are going to unfold. You need to talk to people, you need to be aware, you need to be thinking all the time, and challenging where we are resistive, where that internal inertia that you highlighted as being problematic is holding us back. If that is a constraint, it is not about respecting the way things were done. It's about the way things were done potentially endangering our future. So as a leader, constantly challenging the status quo and where needed, enacting the change that's required to make things better for us or our customers. Doing that in a sensible way, making decisions and being comfortable doing so under conditions of uncertainty and dynamism means being informed by the ability to interpret varied and complex data analytics and business intelligence outcomes. Get trained, get familiar, know how these things work so that you can use that data and use data to make better decisions, ladies and gents. And people will buy into that. If you start to do that well and make effective decisions, even if some of them are wrong, but they've looked good at the time, you'll build confidence in you as a leader and increase your ability to get stakeholders to align behind you, and resources will follow to help you drive towards digital maturity. And creating an environment in which others can learn as you learn continuously will help you maintain your capabilities in order to continue to transform digitally. The implications for us then as leaders is to think about what we're doing to try and enhance that strategic leadership capability. I really enjoy this quote from an executive strategy coach that I interviewed a couple of years ago. And this was pre-COVID and pre a number of environmental changes. And it feels more relevant now than it ever did. That if we accept the world as turbulent, why would we not be giving priority to constantly renewing our capabilities through learning? Surely that's just logic. And in the leadership role, how we do that is so much driven by our success is driven by how we create that environment for others to do so too. That innovative environment that we talked about. People look to the leaders, they see them as examples. If you dedicate yourselves to capability building, others will see that as an example to follow. And this coach made this point that I don't have any problem getting organizational leaders to agree with that, or that the world's dynamic, or that the pace of change is increasing and we need to keep those capabilities up. But the number of strategists and organizational leaders that haven't yet made that connection between that shift in context and their own personal commitment and ability to learn is really surprising. What are you doing about it? What are you doing to enhance your capabilities? And the payback will be huge. It'll be huge in terms of the difference you can make to your organizations, to your colleagues, to your customers, and to your own personal career path. Clearly, I'm a bit biased as the MBA director for Strathclyde, that being able to acquire these capabilities and the methods and the insights to think, talk, and act like a strategic leader is something we really strive to do through the MBA. We think about how you can manage that management learning capability and enable others to learn alongside you as you go through your journey. And we think about 2 dimensions of MBA study that are absolutely crucial. Your confidence as a manager, which comes from practice and knowledge and building your range of capabilities in the core functions to help you manage regardless of the organizational setting. And at the same time, we try and build your abilities to deal with uncertainty. We try and put you in a position where we don't tell you what the answer is. You learn how to address problems, and that prepares you to capitalize on any emergent opportunities or deal with any threats that are coming from ongoing digital disruption. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for your time and attention today in this matter. The new industrial revolution, digital disruption, being powered by digital technologies is shaking the world. We know this. You must feel this yourselves in the world around you. And whether it's a nation or an industry or an organization or individual, we are all subject to these forces of change. And our ability to adapt and to survive and thrive is a combination of technological and human challenges that need leaders that can set this vision for the future and take others on a transformative journey, because the human side is more potent than the technological. And to be those leaders, investing in our own capabilities and growing the capabilities of those around us is really crucial to being able to face the strategic challenges of this disrupted world. Thank you very much, and that was what I hope to cover today in this initial session. What we can do is go to the questions and answers session. So if you've got any comments you'd like to make, then I'd be happy. I'll work through the ones that are there and try and answer them in a live fashion. But if there's anything you'd like to raise, ladies and gentlemen, please do put your questions in the chat. So we have been using software for a long time. What is the difference when we say digital? That's the first question. Thank you very much for this. It's a really interesting one in terms of the origins of digital transformation. But when could we say this even started? You know, do we go back to the 50s with thermionic valves, underpinning the first sort of computer, and not so long ago, mobile was considered disruptive as well. So when we talk about digital, that's a characteristic of any aspect of the world. And software, by its nature, is constructed entirely in digital. When we're talking about digital disruption, we're talking about the underpinning technologies in terms of what can they offer us that is new. So I'd refer you back in that instance, if I may, to the technologies that we covered. So for example, 5G opens up this ultra fast broadband everywhere, low latency, that it's digital, software is digital, but it's the new potential of the technology that really makes it of high interest to us, and something that we should be interested in and decide whether this is something that's relevant to us. So thank you for that. Why is digital transformation discontinuous? Shouldn't it be continuous or incremental changes? Transitional change could be discontinuous but not transformational. So yeah, thank you for that question. When I talk about a discontinuous change, I guess that you could put a time bracket in that, Jason. So over time, we can see that there's been some sort of significant alteration in how we operate as individuals or as society. But you're quite right that in the short term, that's comprised of incremental changes potentially happening continuously over a period of time. Transitional change could be discontinuous but not transformation. Yep, absolutely true. So I think it's useful to as a sensitizer to what digital transformation means in the long run, to talk about it leading to discontinuous change. But you're correct. There's a lot of writing just now that says you can put people off by talking about the big radical changes, when actually on a continuing basis, having small incremental changes is a way to get started, to build momentum, and over time that accumulates into something bigger. So that's definitely something to think about there too. Tuk, thank you very much. May I know, is cryptocurrency considered a digital product or service, which is also a mega trend where not one institution can control it? Thanks, Tuk. So I would say that cryptocurrency, as a potentially a blockchain technology, or sitting in that sort of space, is a specific kind of digital disruption. It's not, we wouldn't say necessarily it's a mega trend. What's the difference between, kind of splitting hairs here? I suppose that it's certainly a digital force of high influence. If it is changing the world around us and no one can control it, yeah, potentially that could be considered a mega trend. 10 years ago, social media was flagged as a mega trend before we started talking in terms of broader digital disruption. And I think for you as a leader, the key thing is this relevant to me? Is it going to have a profound impact on my future? It kind of fits within that future foresight question, doesn't it? Of, okay, if this is going to be a big problem for us, I need to be trying to position my organization now to look at the future. That's certainly something that if you're in and around fintech or banking and finance, you must be understanding the potential impact of cryptocurrency. What I find remarkable is there's still organizations that reject this kind of thinking. And it's not saying you start operating using cryptocurrency or engage in that as a product or service. But I worked with a bank not so long ago that said that it's just a fad. I had a corporate strategy manager say that to me, and you're sitting thinking, okay, that feels, you ask for some evidence, and it feels really worrying for that organization that attitude's still allowed to be there. It's maybe a trend. It is going to shape your future. You need to figure out your response to that at a minimum. So I hope that's okay. Thank you, Tuk. As we can see, the digital transformation was not much in demand among global organizations. However, COVID-19 made us look at our conventional way of working, which certainly did. There's been sunrise in making our systems digitalized. Yes, indeed it has. If the pandemic had not hit us, then we'd have taken at least 10 to digital transformation. Absolutely fantastic point. Thank you, Shubham. So really do feel this is such a key point, that a lot of the traditional inertia and resistance to digital ways of working was dissolved. It became less of a leadership problem, as in the leadership personality or owning an initiative, because the environment enforced the adoption of digital so much in us, we all just accepted we had to get on with it. And I think that's a reasonable estimate, that we achieved 5 to 10 years worth of adoption progress within the space of 12 to 18 months. How can we be more proactive to provide an efficient solution? So I suppose the challenge is, whatever industry you're in, whatever role that you're in an organization now, is trying to find ways to build on that platform. All organizations are now facing the question of, what do we retain from this new digital way of working, and what do we seek to move back to a non-digital way that's actually more effective? It feels really challenging in the sales environment, for example, to build customer relationships in a digital way. I mean, there's advantages efficiency-wise and so on and so forth, but according to your function or industry, how do you need to make the best of the coming out of lockdown phase? And that's going to be different for each organisation, for each country, for each sector. At Strathclyde, we've just launched a Centre for Board Development, and that was one of the key questions that, in fact, that was in the top 3 questions that for the agenda that this board development group with directors from all manner of industries is going to explore. How do we make the most of coming out of this pandemic situation to capitalise on digital? So thank you for that great question. Do we know what resulted in so many initiatives not reaching the intended goal? Yep, so Abdul, great question. Excuse me one sec. So I think the answer for this question is linked into some of the other stats that were put forward in the presentation, that we recognise the importance. So lots of initiatives were triggered, people feeling they had to do something, hence the sort of flurry of initiatives. But that board figure, or that figure of, you know, only 18% of managers believe that they are ready to operate in the digital economy, says that we do recognise there's a huge skills and capability gap and understanding gap all the way through the organisation. So when you put those things together, there was a feeling of a need to do something. So people commissioned and try and engage in technological initiatives. They're not skilled up, or they approach it in a traditional way, maybe not in multifunctional teams, maybe being too aggressive in target setting, not realising the challenges involved with digital working. That leads to a failure to achieve the targeted initiatives. I don't doubt, though, that those organisations will have learned a lot about what it takes to digitally transform. So it won't have been a wasted effort, it's probably presented as such. I'll put a reference in the notes for a case organisation of Carestream Health, which is brilliant. It tracks them over 2 or 3 years and how they went on this journey where failing a lot, realising, wait a minute, we don't really understand our customers, then we don't understand each other and our processes aren't right. And they had to fix so many different issues before they got to a place where digital transformation became successful on a regular basis. Okay, so in terms of that, you know, so much to go into there, and something that you can look to respond to in your own organisation. Thank you. Jason, thank you. CEO, CIO, CTOs not doing their own research. Yep. Absolutely. So, Jason, totally agree that the more you can encourage digital literacy, organizational research, and we can all play a role in this. You know, sometimes it's about feeding information to our senior team, managing upwards in the right way in order to help them make better decisions. In some of the digital transformation programs we're running just now, we focus on business case, we focus on vendor engagement, we focus on understanding the investment process, and skilling up the senior leadership team or the decision makers in order to make better choices. I think you've highlighted there a real key challenge for organizational leaders. Okay, Ahila, thank you. Can you share some common challenges, real life examples in implementing digital transformation? Please share your thoughts on how agile management may help with digital transformation. Okay, thank you, Ahila. So if I may do this in reverse. So you may have heard of the term agile, and agile is used in so many companies and industries now that goes away from the original concept that agile originated as a sort of management philosophy, much like lean or whatever, for how to develop digital products and services, particularly software, in a responsive way, creating cross-functional teams that focus and undertake very focused, rapid working together, high communication flows, and a range of different techniques associated with that lead to the creation of a complex outcome, a systemic outcome in a short period of time with high success. But in that kind of beta mode, constantly prototyping, working things up. So rather than the traditional, set your plan, set your budget, set your milestones, away you go, having something that's much more responsive. That is, I guess, what I was trying to say by permanent beta working. So I really like the concept of design thinking. Design thinking is such a powerful philosophy. It was championed by IDEO, the Californian design house, and developed in collaboration with Stanford as a way of putting humans at the center, designing work methods to be prototypical, to create great products and services and keep them updated for your users on a continuing basis. That design thinking, agile, all help with bringing digital into the core of how we do our work, normalizing that in the organization as how we approach problem solving in multifunctional teams in a fast, focused way. In terms of common challenges with real life examples in implementing digital transformation, there's loads I'll make oblique reference to, in a summary way, because I don't want to name the guilty. I think that the way I think about digital transformation is through the theory of constraints. So this is the idea that the system will only change as fast as its slowest moving part. And I really, there was this is history repeating itself. When industrial automation became popular in the 80s in the car industry, there was a huge amount of money spent on technologies to improve productivity, and actually results got worse because the machines weren't the problem. It was the cultural issue in organizations and automotive organizations of adopting and working with automation in a more productive and effective way. So what I do with any digital transformation initiative is say, well, what's the biggest constraint here? And in light of what we've said today, it's very often a human aspect. There's fear. People don't understand this. Do we understand the technologies? Do we understand the problem that we're dealing with? And find the biggest constraint, find the biggest problem that's influencing what's going on in terms of digital transformation, and try to deal with it. And once you get rid of that one, you move on to the next one. And I'll maybe refer you to the Carestream Health case study that I'll share afterwards, and say that gives you an example of how over time, dealing with the constraints, the things that are holding you back or slowing down the pace of digital transformation, that's a way to progressively improve your digital maturity. At some point, it will become technical as a challenge. You'll deal with the big people issues, and then there'll be a technological challenge you need to deal with. And then you'll kind of go back and forth between cultural or organizational challenges and technological challenges. But if I may, because I could do another 2 hours on that question. A great question, Hale. I hope that's okay in terms of a response for just now. Mustafa, thank you. Knowing that Singapore is globally famous for customer experience management, how are they overcoming the impact on its service users? Any reference to that? So yeah, thank you, Mustafa. So one of the things I really like about the Singapore case as well is that they're very open in their writing about this. They're very open in sharing examples as to how they've worked through those sorts of processual challenges I was just talking about there. I'll put some references in the notes that you may want to follow up, and they're all open. You can go and look at them. I just think there's, right from the very top, there's the right attitude there. There's an acceptance as well that of where you're trying to get to in the long run, that you need to bring people along on the journey. You need to understand the different needs and be willing to be what we would call multimodal. So you don't just have one way of enacting digital transformation. You look for multiple parallel ways so that all your users are satisfied. That's design thinking. That's design thinking applied to service provision. And so if I may, because there's lots of really useful examples in detail there, particularly around the innovation process and how to address that challenge. I'll put some of that in the follow-up notes. Great question. Thank you for that. Simon, so we see a lot of companies who simply do not have access to appropriate market intelligence, market research data, do not have access to it for some strong liability. So how do we address that? Yeah, so in terms of how you engage in market intelligence and market research data, there's so much that you can buy now as a service, Simon. So I think that when we look traditionally at some of the costs, please excuse me, sir. When we look at the costs of going and buying or undertaking market intelligence ourselves, then they can be prohibitive. It can really put us off. But accessing market intelligence as a service or market research as a service, buying specific bits of data or access to data feeds, or even the business intelligence outcomes, can minimize the costs associated with getting what you need to make effective decisions or get the market intelligence that you require. The design of that system or process could also be a struggle for an organization if they're not familiar with the possibilities. As a simple example, engaging perhaps with something like the university, you mentioned Strathclyde, we would always be open to an organization approaching us, and we could help them work through a design process, potentially take some MBA student projects or digital student projects to set up a system where you get what you need at the minimal cost as a service as you go. And There's almost another problem as well, that there's too many options out there. So knowing how to navigate that landscape and cut through it, if you come to somewhere like a university, that feels like the sort of thing we should be helping with as well. I hope that's okay, because beyond that, it would depend on specifically what the organisation's looking for, which markets they're targeting, etc. But seeking help and not losing hope, because like many other aspects of service provision, new low-cost cloud-based, as a service options are springing up all the time. Thank you, Simon. Shyam, thank you. How can organisation leaders manage the fear of losing? Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is a huge problem. Totally agree, Shyam. So I think there's a few ways to respond to that question. Managing the fear of losing jobs is going to be that's going to be the constraint in the adoption of automation. And there's many sectors being disrupted in this way just now. I think facts and figures help. That the broad the commonly held belief is that automation will remove jobs. The Economist last year issued a study that predicted that there'll be a net positive gain of roles as a consequence of automation over the next few years. But that's no comfort if it's your job that we're talking about. What that study really means is different types of work will be created through things like automation. And for me, you've got to face up to that. You've got to talk to people. You've got to explain the changes. You've got to create reskilling opportunities. You've got to look for ways in which roles can be changed rather than eliminated in pursuit of value creation. There's a competitive imperative to do this. If your industry or your processes have the potential to be automated, if you don't do it, then somebody else will. So the question becomes, well, how can we use automation in a positive way to enhance or augment existing jobs? You won't have all the knowledge to do that. It will reside in the people that are currently doing the jobs as well. So a collective approach, an honest approach, and looking for ways to positively change work environment, which looks like what you're suggesting there as well, feels like it's the key forward with that. But that is an area of research just now. There's publications coming out all the time. There's practical research happening all the time to try and find ways to do this well. And it's not, by the way, just blue collar or manual workers as well. This is all the way up the chain, and all of us have to consider what automation and AI mean for our particular roles and how we can help find augmented or combined ways of working. We can start thinking about that in a positive way just now. Great question, thank you for that. So, hi Katerina, thank you. Some end users understand or translate digital transformation as moving to cloud technologies. How would you comment on this? So, cloud is just one aspect, Katerina, thank you, of digital transformation. It's not mandatory, but I've been dealing with some cloud providers lately in conversations, and there was a couple of things they said which I found really interesting, and I'll paraphrase. So these aren't my words; these were theirs. Firstly, there is no cloud. We use this. It's a very beautiful marketing gimmick to talk about the cloud. It's someone else's computer. That's really what you're talking about there. It's clearly we hook into it, but what we're talking about there is gaining access to far greater computing power, far probably more secure computing power. A lot of the old arguments about cloud being less secure is proven not to be the case in recent years, and being able to react in a flexible, scalable way in an instant. And their sales pitch is, why wouldn't you? So cloud has perhaps become synonymous with digital transformation because there's such a strong business case now. There's so many options, it's almost commoditized. And if you don't move in that way, you're unnecessarily adopting risk and cost in your organization. But what I would say is that cloud is a definite consideration within digital transformation, but it helps us and gives us options, but there's so much more to consider. And if I was responding to someone talking about that, I would start to list some of the other possibilities that we were talking about earlier as a way of saying, no, firstly, that's a technology. There are other options, and the technology only creates a potential. We still have the org change and the human challenge to work through as well in what we call digital transformation? Thank you for that. Good question. Gomathy, thank you. How do we thrive in the constantly evolving digital changes? Yeah. This is a fantastic question, and one that's relevant to every single one of us, as well as the people that work for us as well. And I think there's something in this about knowing your role and really being very self-aware here. Firstly, that's of high importance. That previously, and if anyone has a history in doing coding or any sort of digital technology work from maybe 15, 20 years ago, I think I'm talking to myself. You know, there used to be this idea of almost like a self-contained project where it was all yours and you would build it, and things were a lot simpler. Quite simply, the complex nature of digital working now in digital systems and the potential that comes with that is, it just means that there is, I can't think of any examples where we can do anything on our own. So even the digitally savvy know that they are part of a broader team, a broader cross-functional way of working, and being humble, not trying to do too much, being open, being willing to engage with others in not just the task today, but anticipating what comes tomorrow. It means then what you need to stay skilled up on is your narrow bit of that mission. If you're an excellent project manager, you know, just stay really tuned into what's going on there. You know, if you're a technologist in communications, you know, clearly you're going to have something to contribute, but you need others around you. Don't try and do everything. The human challenge, and this is interesting, that the paper from Westerman, or Bonnet and Westerman, that I highlighted earlier, one of the things they say is that some bits of digital transformation aren't changing. The human challenge actually is the same. We understand it a bit better now, and we're calling out more of the employee challenges, but actually that remains unchanged. And therefore, being willing to work in a networked way, being willing to engage with external experts, and being more comfortable with collaboration and cross-functional teams, that's probably the best way to stay relevant in these situations. Don't let the past be the constraint, you know, what you did in the past or what you've developed be the constraint for what you do in the future. You know, they say that that's what killed Nokia, was the commitment to the Symbian operating system. They were so embedded in that and so keen to work in that in-house thing, they missed that the world had gone in a very different direction. So again, these are fantastic questions today, ladies and gents. Thank you. Could do an hour on each of them. I hope that's okay for now. Is digitalization and business automation complement to each other, and is both one side of the same coin? Yeah. So, thank you, Kaustubh. Again, these questions are superb. So, digitalization, I would describe as the exploitation of digital technologies. So digitization is putting something in a digital format. Digitalization is, as a manager or a leader in an organization, saying we're going to use that technology in a certain way. So business automation is one option within the suite of digitalization activities that we have available to each other. So I've described automation as a subset of digitalization. I don't think they are two sides of the same coin. I think one is an option that you have if you're trying to achieve the other. Hope that's okay. But you know, this is part of the digital literacy piece, and I think these are great challenges and great questions. That find out what that means in your own organisation. Do people understand this? Are people talking about it? What does it mean in your industry? What can you do to help create that learning environment we were talking about, where you debate and discuss these things and skill up? Bring in a vendor to talk about business automation and ask them, say, look, we're at the start of our journey. How does this work? Tell us about the environment. The time you invest in that will pay dividends. There was that great question earlier about, you know, sort of, you know, board decisions, and that's something that start those conversations in your organization, and that's really good stuff. How the hyperledger technology and multiple use cases, especially by bringing the trust in parts of the business. How does this have impact on? Yeah, oh, Paritosh, fantastic question as well. So if I was a bank or a stock exchange, so basically the hyperledger technologies eliminate intermediaries. They see them as inefficient and unnecessary. As featured in the press, they've got their own challenges, and sort of cryptocurrencies and blockchain and other things are energy intensive, perhaps becoming less so, but because of the security systems and ways in which they work, that if I was a bank or a stock exchange, I'd be really nervous about this just now, and they are. But part of the research we did in our recent programs was dealing with fintech organizations, and I got told this statement, and I don't wish this to sound rude, because it's, this is a very broad thing, but there was a general characterization of the banking industry as where previously you progressed in your career by doing just enough innovation not to get sacked, that the conservatism and conservative approach to risk management, etc., still exists to a point where digital technologies they're still viewed with skepticism and at an arm's length, but now there's a fear entering the industries that we're going to get destroyed here. We're going to get eliminated, and perhaps by more savvy competitors, or perhaps by an adjacent industry coming in. What happens when the Googles and Apples, etc., of this world decide that they want to become serious players in banking and financial services? That these are challenges and issues that are really crucial to organizations to consider. And I'm sorry, excuse me, with the kind of the examples there, Alipay and WePay, and there's very different attitudes entering industries from outside, that the impact is going to be profound, I think, is probably the way to answer that. Balaji, I wish I could answer this. If I did, I'd be a rich man. How is the digital transformation helping UK to overcome the risk of Brexit? So I guess, I should say that I wish I could answer that in a comprehensive way. That Brexit is part of this globalization megatrend, the liberalization and protectionism kind of directions of how we connect together across borders. Digital transformation has been in the press in the UK around customs forms and the processes of exporting, importing, information sharing between different agencies that we previously were part of, that the human challenge is probably equal to the technological challenge now. Digital transformation will help significantly, I would say, and it's going to be vital to focus on in the near future. At the present time, it's difficult. I'm really trying not to get political about Brexit here. You can probably tell that there's been a major disruption. We're still figuring out how to respond to that, and it will require both digital technological capability and leadership capability to make the most effective responses. For businesses, and not those that sort of supply chain businesses that have been deeply affected by this, for businesses that can provide insights that improve that situation, there is massive business potential, and we need more of it. We need to build new ways of working through digital transformation because of Brexit. Thank you. I'm sorry I can't give a more comprehensive answer to that. That one is not another lecture. That's another 10 lectures that we need to go into explore that. Given the carbon footprint of electronics and digital technologies like blockchain is relatively huge, yep. How can digital transformation accelerate the mega trend of sustainable? These are the best questions I've ever had. I think these are fantastic questions. Thank you, Mo. This is a really crucial topic, and again, we're just sort of scratching the surface of this. So we had the announcement this week from President Biden around the so-called green recovery and the pressure on global leaders to really push towards sustainable development. We've got COP26 in Glasgow coming up, which is really bringing a focus to in and around Strathclyde just now as well. And I think the answer is quite similar to the Brexit one. We need to find the ways in which to get our responses, our activities and organisations to correspond. You can look at simple things like the extent to which our energy comes from renewable sources. You get things like you locate a server farm in a cold location, so there's a kind of natural event going on there. But it's a great point, and if you approach it from the sustainability side, you look for ways in which sustainability development can be enabled by digital technologies. So forget the cost of it first of all, just enable them to improve our energy usage, to improve our social impacts, to reduce waste, to achieve the UN or move towards at least the UN Sustainable Development Goals, using digital any way we can, and then by reverse applying sustainability logic to the use of digital technologies. So the energy intensive nature of blockchain and cryptocurrencies, etc., where computers have to do a huge amount of work to prove who they are and make the system work in the background, there must be a better way. We must innovate our way out of these sorts of challenges. I asked this question to a futurologist, so someone who, it's like no pressure, you just predict what's going to happen in 30, 40 years and no one's ever going to hold you to account. But the futurologist said, look, if you, at all kinds of industrial revolution through history, there's been these sorts of questions, and people will point out the challenges, and we've always found a way to creatively innovate out of them. And what's important is the collective nature of our understanding and action. And so when it feels like there's a real movement with sustainable development, that it is making that agenda clearer, it's integrating into boardrooms, it's becoming part of regulation and government, that there's an acceptance there of what we need to do sustainable development wise. That will help put pressure and create opportunity for innovation for digital transformation to improve. And it just feels like digital transformation and digital disruptions may be a couple of steps behind sustainable development. And the more digital becomes at the heart of government, the more awareness is raised about some of the challenges, and we bring that together with sustainable development. System level innovation is the way forward there. But what a fantastic question. And if you're looking to start up a business in that space of how we achieve this, massive, massive potential. What could be the next mega trend? We are currently seeing any glimpses of it? Well, it's again a brilliant question, and if I knew the answer, I would have to charge you to tell you. I'm afraid that I'm really not sure. That for me, what we've seen changes in mega trends happening lately. So globalization, I've mentioned a few times today. We've seen a rise in protectionism. So protectionism is where governments try and restrict the flow across borders of goods and services and finance and stuff. There's a few recent examples. Brexit's an example. There's been others in the US lately, etc. And because of COVID, the level of international trade flows is less than half than it was 2 years ago. So for me, there's a question of, will that mega trend ever revert? My feeling is more that we're going to see some of the current previously separate trends converging. And I think the last question from what is a good example of it, that sustainability meets digital transformation. Where's the confluence here is going to be of high interest in the future. And so sustainability plus digital plus globalization creates a new set of issues and challenges. What about the aging so-called aging population as well? You start to add these sorts of things in, changing demographics, rebalancing of the political sphere. Megatrends perhaps were more distinct decades ago because we weren't so connected as a world. For me, it's more a confluence of megatrends that we're likely to see. My goodness, this is that. I'm sorry, that's quite a thin answer. I don't know beyond that, and it's going to be fun finding out. I think it's probably the main thing. When we think about adopting digital technology, there are big cost barriers. Yep. The challenge is how we put a framework to measure ROI for such investments. What's your advice to managers who are trying to figure out the ROI for such programs? Okay, so I think thank you, Deepak. I would say that actually the adoption of digital technologies doesn't need to be expensive. The cost barriers for adopting software as a service offerings are significantly lower than they used to be. There's so many options we have now to gain access on an almost rental basis to service provision, and we probably reckon you probably pay in a different way. You're giving up your data, you're becoming hooked on a system, But I think of like Spotify. I'm quite willing to pay that money on a monthly basis. I'm never going back to buying CDs or building a CD collection. And the amount I spend on Spotify in a year is a fraction of what I spent on CDs, and yeah, I've got access to every track in the world. So I think that the ROI framework for me will apply to. We need new tools there. So, or we need to think about the process, not just deploy how we used to measure the costs of innovations and investment cases. So that's part of that digital literacy at the board level. Figuring out ROIs for programs is really tricky as well, because you will get perhaps a cost saving and an efficiency gain. You might get some sort of new product. You can measure the revenue for that. But what if you have to make that change because the customers expect a sort of certain digital outcome now? Even if it's a bit, even if it's marginal, the return on investment, if you don't do it, you might go out of business. So that's before we think of the learning gains that you need to make. I was talking about, I supervise a DBA student who's in the innovation space, and we were talking yesterday about this very topic around measuring success. What price or what return do you put on the learning that you gain from trying an initiative? Yeah, maybe it doesn't pay off in the short term, but you start to build a capability in your organization that might be vital for your survival in a couple of years. So my advice to answer your question to managers trying to figure out the ROI for such programs is to be nuanced. Yes, look at the finances, but also think about the secondary benefits or the capability build benefits or the existential threat that's coming from not, so almost make the risk-based case the not case for doing this. Can we afford not to do this digital technology investment? And build the literacy around what's available as a service in your industry. Most industries are moving in that way now, where you can get anything as an industry, anything as a service. So you used to get power by the hour. Hire a Rolls-Royce jet engine. Think of any software application, accounting software, customer relationship management software. Office 365. Etc. You've got all these different tools which are now available as a service, which just spreads the cost right out. I was talking to someone who's saying that if you're sufficiently motivated, you can now get ransomware as a service, so you can actually outsource your cyber crimes. So there's plenty of options out there. And for the record, I do not advocate engaging in ransomware as a service. I think that's deplorable. But just as an example of, if you can imagine it, someone somewhere will be providing it as a service at a low cost, and think about how you can work with that in your investment cases. Do you agree that services like Uber, Grab, ride-hailing are digital transformation? Yep. So they very much are. When I was doing the fintech research, Uber was described to me as an example of a transformative customer experience. And the fintech specialist, because not just the multi-sided, or sorry, not the multi-sided, the multi-sided platform approach. So you're bringing together drivers and passengers in a way that wouldn't otherwise happen. You're also enabling fintech, the payment methods. You get out the taxi and you don't pay. Well, it feels like you don't pay. You don't hand over money. It's all happened in the background, and you rate and serve. That's a digital disruption to that industry. That's a transformation of that industry. And I really like the way it was described to me. It eliminates the friction from the process, eliminates the challenge in finding a cab. It eliminates the issues of finding change and money, and makes it really smooth as a user. So I would agree that they are examples of digital transformation. Thank you, Jason. The biggest downside, Ravinder, thank you, to people as a result of digital transformation. I think there's a real risk to social relationships from digital transformation. I know that may sound odd as we sit connected around the world. That there is definitely something in the humanity of meeting people that is hard to replicate in a digital environment. It doesn't mean that we won't make progress towards a better version of that online. But I remember reading about 5 or 6 years ago about Facebook affective disorder, FAD, where the more people are connected to social media networks, the more isolated they feel. Because you see this artificial view of other people's lives, it's all edited, it makes you feel you're missing out, and you're not actually having a real social exchange, as in a person-to-person social exchange. So I mentioned earlier the sales environment. I think we've all experienced a disruption to our work lives where there's been big upsides, big gains in, the convenience of work, but we've missed our colleagues, and we've missed the little chats we've had at the water cooler, etc. So, I mean, I'm shooting from the hip with that one, Ravinder. That's my gut reaction to it. There may be more sophisticated answers, but I would say that is what we need to, looking at the Singapore government, digital to the core, but human at heart, that we need to always retain that human aspect to our systems and our processes. It's not all about digital technologies, it's about digital and people together. Fantastic, thank you everybody. Oh, sorry, I managed to scroll the background screen. How can we engage customers in an organization's digital transformation strategy? Because if it does not impact customers positively, I suppose competitively. Fantastic question, Christina, and there's 2 or 3 ways that we can do that, I would suggest. The first way is we use our digital service provision to gather data and to actually analyze the data. So like learning analytics in an educational setting, or customer usage statistics for Netflix, or anytime we've got a digital system, how can we look at where customers are using or not using our system, or where they're complaining, analyze that data in order to create the next version of products or services that better meet their needs. There's been a massive rise in ethnographic studies of consumers to try and maximize the customer service design experience. So an ethnographic study is where you go and watch people use a product or service in person, observe their interactions, so that you're seeing in reality where they really like something or they're really frustrated, and reading their emotions. And so engaging with live customers as they consume or use your product or service is hugely important as well. And using new tools like journey mapping. And if you've not heard of this, this is where you draw almost like a flow diagram of how customers engage with your product or service, and you anticipate their emotions and their satisfaction through that engagement, their customer journey, as we call it, and really focus your innovation on the constraints, on the negative points there, in order that when you're deciding which digital technologies to deploy, how to change and improve your services, you can direct it to maximize the customer satisfaction. And you're absolutely right that if you don't do that, then somebody else will be doing that. But also thinking about what data can you access about those customers. Going back to the marketing question earlier, there's customer analysis as a service. If you were in a particular sector and you wanted to know more, there's actually increasingly data available from third parties that can help you with that too. Okay, thank you for that, Christina. Paratosh, thank you. While US and other Western countries are using physical vaccination certification, digital certificates, yep, complete vaccination training. So India has, thank you for that, Paratosh. The Digital India projects have been incredibly impressive in recent years. That the commitment to develop the whole digital system for the country is going to pay dividends increasingly over the years to come. So I think digital certificates makes a lot of sense. Oh, sorry, I missed one prompt earlier. Excuse me. Did I? No, I didn't. Using digital certificates is because you can, and they make a lot of sense, and it just, it's so helpful to have that permanent record. I think in the mobile payments are probably most sophisticated or advanced in Africa, as a fantastic example of using digital technology to spur positive social change, progression, and to make a really efficient and effective, kind of systems in the Philippines as well. There's a particular concept that does go some way to explaining this, called institutional voids. So an institutional void is where something like a formal system, whether it's infrastructure or the judiciary or the banking system or whatever, is ready to innovate. I think one of the problems in locations like the UK is that we're pretty confident in some aspects of our systems, which has slowed the pace of innovation. There wasn't an institutional void. It was at a level where everyone was pretty comfortable, probably even a bit complacent. But the drive and the desire to address a gap or a void meant investment in infrastructure. That means that India, Africa, Philippines can respond in a particular way to aspects of this crisis in the best possible manner, in an exemplary manner. And there's a lot to be learned from what drove those investment cases. You know, this is a continuing process. It keeps evolving, it keeps unfolding. Great question, thank you very much. And I wouldn't call them third world. I mean, I would say this is developing nations, and the world is increasingly flattening out, and we need to be learning from each other at all times. Bun, thank you. I think this is the last question, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. I know we've run on a little bit, but these have been absolutely phenomenal questions. Thank you. Is digital transformation can change people leadership capability to assist? Can people change leadership capability to assist on the change? Yeah. So if that question, if I've read it right, one is that this, how can we use digital transformation to help people change their leadership capabilities for the future? There's so much that we can do. So digital transformation in HRM and people development systems is, you know, there's a massive boom there in how we manage internationally, manage locally, manage productivity, manage training and development. Digital transformation can be deployed to any function in an organization. You know, it's a really, you can always turn it in on itself and find new digital ways to improve how we work in any function or system. So it absolutely can support leaders, can help us track our progress and find new educational sources. And it's great fun exploring how to do that. So I think that was a really great set of questions. Have I answered them all? Any of my colleagues note anything that I haven't? I think I've got all the questions answered. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for taking part today, for sharing your views in the polling, for listening and for asking some absolutely superb questions. I hope that it gives you things to think about, things to work about. We'd love to hear from you afterwards.